Hi there, my name is Tom and welcome to my channel. So today we're going over my top 10 choice Mordhau builds. Though I'd like to mention that these are all explicitly in my opinion, I'm aware that most weapons in the game are viable, and that anyone can become exceptionally good with almost any weapon with the right practice. I will however be going into detail about the pros and cons of these builds and weapons, explaining my reasoning, and hopefully enlightening you in the process. I'll also be giving each build a C to S+ rating in frontline and duels separately from their numbered rank, with a few honourable mentions near the end. Enjoy. The 330's Zweihander is in my opinion a primarily frontline type build, with some medium to high viability in duels. The 330 armor loadout is a particularly popular archetype used in tandem with the 10 slot equipment pieces Zweihander and Spear. This build is for many players a real contender for being one of the best frontline classes. 330 particularly being a high risk reward armor variant, it can often be perilous to run this against veteran players, with the lack of lower body armor being an easily exploitable weakness. However, in frontline this can often be negligible as a large number of players are less likely to take notice of your designer genes, and with its almost unmatched range and indomitable damage, regularly landing 2-hit kills against all but the most armored opponents, this build can often high roll long combo sprees whilst leaving your victims wondering why they didn't step back further. With its lower armor taken into account, I'd rate this a B class duels build and an A class frontline build. 333, Messer and Heater Shield. This build being my only shield using variant on this list, it, for me at least, seems to hit all of the right notes for the value you can get out of your 16 points, utilising the classic 333, of which we'll be making a few more entries on this list. The Messer and Heater Shield build really gets the most out of your defensive choices, whilst making you a real pain in the arse to engage with. Making good use of the Messer's unusually long range and quick speed, I found this build to be threatening to most players of most skill level. Being so simple to use, it can excel at improving the survivability of a less skilled player. Though I wouldn't recommend being too reliant on shields for your defense, it's hard to deny that they're very effective. I feel as though this combo is ideal in frontline and duels in equal measure, if you're capable at managing your stamina whilst using a shield, which leads nicely into its con. Honestly, this build seems to suffer with quick stamina drain. However, all in all, I'd say this deserves an A class in duels and an A class in frontline. 330, Poleaxe, Medic Bag, and Firebomb. Now, outside of making an almost civilian build with the heavy hand axe, toolbox, and a medkit, this build excels at being a frontline viable support build, utilising the same high-risk reward armor variant as our number 10. This build focuses on staying a part of and reinforcing your team's frontline in frontline. Using the Poleaxe's wonderful versatility, balance, and value for points, you'll have the power to poke from afar and hack and slash with almost anyone. With your Firebomb and Medkit often played in combination to hold the enemy line whilst helping your team recuperate, this build is in a league of its own for earning points and dominating the leaderboard. Honestly, this build becomes more fun every time I use it. However, in duels, its viability is somewhat poor due to having the same weaknesses on number 10 without the strengths. I can only bring myself to give this a C in duels, but still clocking in a solid A in frontline. 010, Maul, Bloodlust and Rush. See, now you might be saying, Tom, why are you trolling? However, this build in particular has a place in my heart for the sheer enjoyment it provides, along with its consistency in providing the crunch and the utter devastation after a successful flank. The Maul is for all intents and purposes the slow, hulking brick-on-a-stick weapon in this game, its only redeeming quality being its devastating damage. Here's the thing. With Bloodlust and Rush, it provides the build a much-needed survivability to coincide with its damage, creating what is essentially an extreme high-risk reward build, having only one single piece of 1-point body armor, of which its sole purpose is to keep you from being one-tapped all of the time. You'll still be one-tapped a lot of the time, but this gives you a chance in situations you'd otherwise be hopeless in. This build is rather blatantly complete trash in duels for reasons that should be obvious. With almost no armor and a slow weapon speed, this build is often suicide outside of frontline. So as such, it gets an abysmal C rating in duels and a very biased A+ in frontline. Coming in at our number 6 spot, we have the 332 Evening Star. Now you may be saying, Tom, why 332? Well, coming in at 8 points, the Evening Star is 1 point too expensive to rock the classic 333. However, I would still take the 2-point leg protection over perks or equipment any day, as the Evening Star doesn't quite boast the same range as the Poleaxe or the Zweihander. However, an argument could be made to include fireproof in this build. This weapon excels at landing incredibly powerful hits without the pitiful range of the Maul, whilst outstamming your opponent. Even though it deals less damage than the Maul, its reach and all-round consistency makes it a real menace in most engagements, with its alternate grip being surprisingly swift in close quarters environments. In duels, this weapon is a genuine tank, with what can often feel like a guaranteed win if you can sustain the fight into the late game. This weapon's main drawback is in frontline, where its often poor speed leaves much to be desired, making 1v2s difficult and anything more often impossible. And so with that in mind, I'm happy to give this an S rating for duels and an A rating for frontline. 111 War Axe Bloodlust Rush. This build operates much like our previous speedy Maul build, except with some slightly more comprehensive armor. Think of this as the Super Saiyan equivalent of the prior Maul build. More defense, greater weapon speed, phenomenal weapon cleave. Despite the build suffering a small percentage of movement speed loss in comparison to the Maul build, it's so low I believe it's completely negligible. You've undoubtedly already seen multiple people running variants of this build. We all have, and for good reason. If you're desperate to get into the game and get a nice, quick, satisfying kill feed, this is honestly probably the best way to do it. With all these improvements in the flank game taken into account, this build lands an honest B rating in duels and a well-deserved S rating in frontline. And getting on with our number 4 slot, we have the Bastard Sword and the Buckler, 333. In almost all 1v1 scenarios, the Bastard Sword and Buckler are almost always an immediately advantageous build, with the sword's stab rivaling the rapier and its swing making an excellent tool for throwing off your opponent whilst providing solid secondary damage. The weapon leaves nothing to complain about, as what it lacks in range it makes up for in speed and damage. A complete powerhouse, with the Buckler only complementing it with equally good stamina sustain. All of this wrapped up nicely in the ever-classic 333 armor variant. I personally use this in every single duel I feel as though I've got a stake in. Its unforgiving ferocity makes it an almost instantaneous death for players who are even slightly too reactionary. This build's one and only downside is its inefficiency against larger groups of enemies. Granted, its ability to 1v2 is extremely solid, you're often simply dead in any larger engagements. All in all, this build receives an S+ class in duels and an A class in frontline. 333 Cleaver, Bloodlust, Tenacious. You knew it was coming. This is the build where if you happen upon one of your favourite weapons on the ground mid-frontline, you will ascend into the form of a Dark Souls boss. With the 333 Bloodlust and Tenacious, your defensive capabilities are at complete max. With Tenacious being interchangeable for the bandage or fireproof, you will be more irritating to kill than a shield user. And despite its one-cost status, the Cleaver is a solid close-range competitor with extremely swift attacks and quick lethals utilizing multiple headshots. Like the Bastard Sword, Rapier, and the Short Spear, this weapon manages to be extremely difficult to combat for players who are even a little bit too reactionary or unfamiliar with it. As you know, your objective with this build is to locate an effective weapon, say the Zweihammer or the War Axe for example, and proceed to decimate the opposing team with what is essentially a 20 to 26 point build. I have almost no doubt that in future patches Bloodlust will receive some form of nerf due to how effective this build is on frontline. It does, however, leave a lot to be desired in duels, as the Cleaver and Bloodlust tend to be wasted on duels almost completely. I can't help but give this a humble B rating in duels and an exceptional S+ rating in frontline. Honestly, this is one of the best frontline classes. If you haven't tried it yet, please, for the love of God, give it a go. It's incredible. And now it's time for some quick-fire honourable mentions. Number 1, 033 and Spear. I found this hideous, disgusting build to be somewhat of a cosmic horror on horseback, with the power to give eldritch gods cancer. Number 2, anything with the toolbox and heavy hand axe. You know you can't fight, but you're holding the enemy at bay, and sir, I salute you. Coincidentally, this is also the build of the professional troll. And finally, number 3, the training build. 333, training sword ×2, and a medic bag. I love being able to pull this build out on dual servers to give new players a real way to improve without the repetitive pain of death. Honestly, you'll make friends using this build, it's that good. Coming in at our number 2 slot, we have the 333 Greatsword. Now, in my opinion, this is the single most balanced weapon in the game, with optimal speed, damage, and range with nigh on no drawbacks. Perfect for new players and veterans alike. I would have had no shame putting this build as the top spot if it wasn't for the sheer ferocity of my number 1. If this is your go-to build, you are likely someone who desires a fair and noble fight with little shame in defeat, and the power to type good fight in chat when it was actually a bad fight. Solid S-class in both duels and frontline. Honestly, I can't express enough how much I like this build. If you're not a huge fan of swords and you go for axes, the hammers, the pole arms, and all that other stuff, bring it back, give this a go, you'll enjoy it, honestly. I swear to God, it's too balanced to not be effective in pretty much every single set of hands. It's great. And finally... Now, I'd wager most of you, or at least some of you, would have seen this coming as our number 1 slot. 333, Battle Axe, Fireproof. This weapon has the power to be so deceptive in its attack speed. I cannot count the number of times the Battle Axe has removed my head when I felt as though I had more time to parry. With damage that can ultimately compete with the biggest weapons in the game, and an alternate grip that only serves to make this weapon's attacks even more deceptive, the Battle Axe simply has no downside short of its stab attack, which still manages to be a valuable tool in the build, as this too is deceptively quick. Ultimately, the 1 point used on Fireproof could be reallocated for any number of things. Although after a bit of trial and error, I found Fireproof to be a strong contributor towards that extra lethality in frontline games. And even further boast to its frontline viability, this thing's cleave is almost as effective as that of the War Axe. I completely believe this weapon is more threatening, vicious, and simply destructive than any other weapon in the game. And for those who main this, when ranked is available, you are likely to have a very, very good time, sir. I am sure the subreddit is going to be full of people complaining about this weapon when ranked becomes a thing. Solid S+ in duels and S+ in frontline. There is nothing else to say. I wanted to thank you for making it to the end of this second Mordhau video of mine. Again, all of these were just in my opinion, and I would love to hear what sort of builds you find most effective. I'm admittedly not the biggest fan of using lots of perks in the game, but almost all of these classes can become somewhat more effective in frontline if a little space can be found for Fireproof or Tenacious. Anyways, thanks again, let me know what you think, and please feel free to like and subscribe, it would mean a lot. Thank you very much. Tom out.